Let's proceed with the second half of this discussion, shall we? Which is the issue of morality. So what I would like to do is define morality quite loosely for you, which is this: treat others and yourself how God wants all his children going ahead of myself here, to be treated. So with the first thing, with the ethics, if you like, the first thing here, treating other people how I would like to be treated myself would be, as you can see from our previous discussion, would confront a lot of areas of our life and would help us become far more ethical and loving in our behaviour towards each other. You can see that? This one here, of course, is now an extension of that. We're now extending that into how does God want all of her children to be treated? That's how I need to treat everyone else and myself, actually, how God wants all of her children to be treated. So actually, you are out of harmony with morality even if you treat yourself how God doesn't want you to be treated. While you may be in harmony with ethics, you are out of harmony with morality. Does that make sense to everyone? Yeah. Now, this issue is a very, very big issue because, firstly, we need to then make we need to have some feelings about how God wants all of her children to be treated, don't we? Now, of course, many religions have done that emotionally, and intellectually they've done that, and they finish up treating people very badly. In fact, wars have been created about how religions believe God wants them to treat another religion, for example. Complete wars have been created about that. But of course, these two points are not mutually exclusive. Do you know what I mean by mutually exclusive? We're not saying you can do that without doing that or do that without doing that. So, if I had this viewpoint inside of myself that God wanted me to punish other people for not being of the same religious faith that I am, let's say I had that viewpoint and I believe that to be true, asking myself the first question would confront that viewpoint, because I wouldn't want to be punished myself for having a different religion than another person. So how can I then justify treating another person badly because of having a different religious faith than myself? So we need to add both of these two statements together to create what would be loving action towards other people. Does that make sense to everyone? Unfortunately, most religions do this only. The reason why I raised the first issue with religions in the first century is because most religions do this bit that I've done a ring around here. And they make a lot of suppositions about how God or what God wants without any consideration to the first ethical issue. Can you see that? In other words, what they do is they say, oh, God wants me to, expel homosexuals from my congregation. That's what it says in the Bible, so that's what we're doing. But if they ask themselves, would they like to be expelled as a heterosexual from the congregation? They would probably say, well, no. I wouldn't like to be expelled for anything that I'm doing from a congregation. So how can they then justify the second statement as to what God wants? Does that make sense? And the reality is, one of the things God wants is for us to do the first thing. So that's what we also need to bear in mind. God wants us to only consider treating other people how we would like to be treated. That's one of the things God also wants. Because obviously, once we ask ourselves that first question, we have the capacity to understand what kind of treatment most of us are able to accept and what kind of treatment is unloving, that we can't accept. Right? But this second issue is very important, and the reason why I raise it as morality rather than ethics is because normally what happens on the planet is that people decide what's moral and what's not. Does that make sense? That's what people do. People do it. What I'm suggesting is the only person who has the right to tell us what's right and what's wrong is God. And I'm not saying he's going to do that in a book that people have written, because that's open to interpretation and misinformation and also falsification. He's going to have to do it by having some kind of communication with your heart, is the way that it's going to have to work. Some kind of communication with your heart. So, issues of morality include issues such as, is lying right or wrong? Is stealing right or wrong? Right? Is embezzlement, how do you spell it? Is that right? No, it's not good enough. It's just close enough. Is it one Z or two? Two Zs. Is it EL? Yeah. Meant. So, embezzlement. Is that right or wrong? From whose perspective? From God's perspective. What about adultery? What about what the Bible calls fornication, which is really just two people who are unmarried having sex or so forth? What about homosexuality? And so forth. We can continue listing things like to do with sex as well, masturbation and so forth. We can list all of these different things, can't we? In the end, the person who determines whether any of those things are right or wrong would be the person who created us for the purpose that he created us or she created us. So, if we examine the purpose for which we were created, that is a fast way of determining what that person might be interpreting as what's right or what's wrong. So it's a bit like a person who creates a knife. Do you think their intention originally, a person who creates a knife, was that it's used in a murder? No. So, because a knife has other roles, doesn't it? Like you can cut up food and you need it for doing all sorts of things. So a knife, while it has the potential to be used in an unloving manner to harm, physically hurt or even destroy a person's life, or a loving manner to cut up food and help you eat, you see, then you can see that a person who created the thing, their intention is involved in what its underlying use is. Now, if we examine that with regard to a knife, we could then go, okay, there is either a loving use of a knife or an unloving use of a knife. A loving use of a knife is to help people in their life. An unloving use of a knife would be to hinder people with their life. that would be an unloving use of a knife.